All right, family. Greetings, everyone. Habari Gani from Chicagoland, United States. Welcome to everyone. Thank you all for taking some time out on this day to gather and have this really rich conversation. I'm very, very excited about what we have uh, coordinated for today. On behalf of the Ancestral Institute, we have the founder, CEO, HNIC, on the call. You can say some words in a few moments. But Antoine Craigwell is the curator of the organization that is sponsoring this conversation today. His amazing organization, amazing work, and this is the purpose of that organization. So we are on the day of Kwanzaa called Nia, which is about purpose, which you could think of as an individual or as a collective. And the collective mission statement for the Ancestral Institute is to gather people from around the diaspora to have important conversations about culture and healing and wellness and unity and strengthening our tools and strategies to make sure that our people are well wherever we are. Um, as much as we complain about the white man technology, this Zoom is allowing us a moment to be able to connect all around the world. We got people from different time zones and different parts of the world coming together as one for a moment just to share space. So I'm really excited about what we're able to do. Most of us are at home, comfortable. You see Mama Jacqueline with some her plants, got folk in there in their living room, people eating. So I just as much as sometimes it can feel disjointed, there's intimacy that Doom allows that I'm excited to be the backdrop for a conversation about some really important stuff for all of us. So, my name is Obari again from Chicago. I've been working with the Ancestral Institute for a little bit under a year now, and I'm just really excited about the work that's possible when we come together, just like this, and put our hearts, minds, and spirits together. Part of the acknowledgement that we're having today is to commemorate the celebration of Kwanzaa, African American holiday, where we celebrate certain principles and values that we hope can be anchors and guides to our year. And so we are ending the year with the celebration. And so if you are unfamiliar with Kwanzaa, that is perfectly fine. We're going to share some more about what that is about and what the intention and purpose of Kwanzaa is and how it connects to cultural rituals and practices and indigenous ways of being and knowing that we are doing the work to preserve all around the world against opposition, despite things that we have lost. There's attempts to recover memory and to restore, and there's a sense that that is at the center of a lot of the panelists' work around their wellness as scholars, as researchers, as healers, as therapists, as professors. Everyone that you'll hear from today has spent their life trying to integrate this question of who we are at our core into the work of how to make us better, despite being trained in things that sometimes take us further away from ourselves. So that is a conversation we're going to have today. I'm going to start with a brief sort of frame of what Kwanzaa is about and what the integration of cultural wellness is about, and then we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have the panelists speak as briefly and concisely as we can. I know that there's some folk on here who have wisdom and insight to add to the conversation, so I want to make sure we do have some time for the community to talk. Um, we do value the sacrifice that you made to spend this time with us, so we want to make sure that y'all are not just observing a conversation from afar, but participating in it because we need everyone's collective voice. So let me get started. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Hopefully, everyone can see and hear. If you
Name
can mute
Obai.
yourselves as you come in,
Oops, sorry.
that would make our lives a little bit easier. No problem. Let me make sure I click all the right buttons. Okay, I think we're good. Here we go. Can y'all see my screen now? I unmute and give me a yabo. Good, fantastic. So in proper order, before I do say another word, I would like to ask for the permission of my elders to begin this conversation? Anyone over 44, 60 or above, preferably. It just give me an okay to begin.
So you never met?
That don't sound like a yes. Who's that? Somebody's off mute again. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for the permission of my elders to begin this program. Anyone over
As
60?
one who's way over 64, you have my permission for sure.
Sure, I'll take it. I'll take it. And also, part of how I was taught to begin programs was to give an acknowledgement of those who are not here physically, a libation of sorts. It's a little bit different over Zoom, but I still just wanted to recognize that we are here gathering as representatives of lineages of ancestors who have contributed to us, who have paved ways for us. And so in honor of that, I also wanted to have the first voice, and what I wanted to share be an ancestor of ours who was a very wise guiding sort of point for my development and lots of us in the diaspora, to help us think through the frame for this question we're having today. I'm gonna play a couple words from Baba Dr. John Henry Clark to give us a sense of why we're here, what we're talking about, and the connection between culture and wellness, and the power of rituals. And we're talking culture, and we're not just talking about like the aesthetics, the dress, and the language, but also what it means to us in terms of values and principles, and ways of being. And so the charge was given to us decades ago by Baba Dr. John Henry Clark. And so I wanted to share his words again as a way to begin this program in proper order. Hide my floating controls. There we go.
I don't hear it.
Can y'all not hear this?
No.
Make sure I press
Nah, we can't hear it.
one more time.
As you share, you
Yeah,
gotta click the option on the Zoom screen to allow you to.
I'm addressing my
Right, that's it.
question to Mr. Carr. I want to know what happened to the so-called Negro culture in America.
The most tragic destruction of African culture.
I got those beans.
Was the destruction of the African culture brought to these shores.
No.
Brought to America's shores. Now, the first thing they did was to forbid the drum, forbid all African ceremonies, forbid African ornaments, literally to destroy a people in such a manner that they had to be remade in an American image. This was not exactly true in the West Indies. It was slavery, make no mistake about it. But because it was on an island, many of the Africans could communicate with each other and maintain some of the African culture, while in the United States it was impossible, because as they arrived, mother, brother, sister were split up and they went in opposite directions. Then they were resold. They might have been resold within a matter of days after they were sold the last time. So it was difficult for relatives to keep track of each other. And it was difficult for a continuity to be maintained in African culture. This was the beginning of the fragmenting of our family in this country. It was also the beginning of the demeaning and the negation of the masculinity of the black male in America. This demeaning of our culture and this reading us out of the commentary of human history has left deep psychological scars. What we are trying to do now is a massive job of rebuilding the inside, the spirits, the hopes, the history, the culture of a people. We're trying to
So that is the charge. That is the call that brought me into psychology. The desire to rebuild the insides of a people, to understand we're talking intergenerational trauma now, which is not just your grandmama was mean. There was generations of attempts from a vicious adversary, very calculated, that understood the power of our culture, the power of our drums, our language, our rituals, outlawed them, punished us for practicing them. And around the time that my father was becoming a man, he was inspired by these scholars, this movement. We're talking 1965, when King was assassinated, when Malcolm was assassinated the year prior. We're talking about the riots. We're talking about Black Panther Party. All this was happening in the United States around this time that was the same time that birthed the movements that created what we now celebrate as Kwanzaa. It's important for me to put that context front and center because it is a beautiful holiday. Culture is a beautiful thing, but sometimes there are things that are born out of fire, out of need, out of desperation, that if we lose the context of the warfare that instead that insisted that we go deeper into ourselves to revive some of these pieces of culture again against opposition, we miss some of the essence of it. It was really important to think about that in present context. So right now, we are in the United States in particular. We're going to speak to what that looks like in other places: Puerto Rico, South Africa, Zanzibar. We got people from around the world to can speak to what are the contexts, the political, social, economic contexts that Black people find themselves all over the world that still require a certain urgency around these conversations around unity, around sovereignty, around independence, and in the conversations around mental health and wellness. How is it that we can make sure we keep front and center the cultural, the racial traumas, the medicines and the tools that we still have that some of us, you know, didn't like forget about, but that were violently removed from us, and that we're against opposition, trying to recover, restore against this kind of opposition. This is a quick. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the European and what they did, but it is important to understand that these holidays and celebrations and these conversations are happening against some opposition. Some of that represented in this clip. Let me let some folk in first.
How it is you
Don't let
voted
it
for
frighten
Donald
you.
Trump when you're so into facts, because his entire campaign is not based in facts. It was all based in propaganda and emotion.
I voted for Donald Trump for one reason only. His policies, if implemented, would slow the dispossession of whites in the United States. If he were to deport all illegal immigrants, if he were to think very hard about letting in any Muslims, all of this would slow the rate at which whites are becoming a minority.
How?
So that's the ideology. This is a little bit about the mechanism, just real
Take
quick.
the Department of Education, close it. I'm going to close it. We'll have one person, could be you if you decide to retire.
Okay, Mr. President, here's what bothers
Central
me.
Cast.
Here's what bothers me about that. So let's say you have a liberal city, let's Los Angeles, San Diego, and they just decide we're going to get rid of that history. We got new history. This is America built off the backs of slaves on stolen land. And that curriculum comes in.
Then we don't send them money. We would save half of our budget.
Okay.
And we're going to send. But if they want to do that,
Because you do lose control when you go low.
No, they take.
So real quick, just wanted to make sure we're talking about, when we say opposition, we're saying that we're in a moment now when there's much more vigorous opposition to the truth, the banning of books, the removing of diversity, equity, inclusion, the threat of critical race theory has always meant that there are people who are desperate for holding their positions that will try to convince us through whatever propaganda they can use that our culture is backwards, it's primitive, it's demonic. And so Kwanzaa was born out of an attempt for Black people in the United States that were living in that time, that were watching the Kings and watching the Malcolms and seeing the rise of nations of Islam and asking a very particular question about language. My father, for example, changed his name from Anthony to Tabiti. He changed his dress. He sent all of his kids to African Center schools. This is me when I was probably like 7 at a school called New Concept Development Center, started by Hakeem Matabuti and a bunch of other folks that hard for me to even imagine what it took for them to create independent institutions at that time. My children went to the same schools, and so we're in that moment of trying to revive and restore and maintain some of these cultural celebrations. Of just got inducted into a council of elders, is in training. I'm not old enough to really do it, but they saw the need to think forward around preserving culture and thinking about what does it mean to extract principles that we as the descendants of the Africans that found ourselves in the United States struggled for a long time with, who we are, right? We felt like a lost tribe for a long time. And one of the powers that I find in being an African American is, some of us are doing the DNA, and you go back and you look at the DNA chart, and the question that I had growing up was like, who do I belong to? Which tribe do I belong to? What language is mine? What drum style is mine? What spiritual system is mine? And when you see the DNA chart, I see that I got percentages in my blood from all around the diaspora. I got folks from West Africa in my blood. I got people in West, East, South. And so we as the African Americans are a composite. We have a sort of a meta analysis, if you will. It gives us a birthright access to lots of different parts of the continent, and as that has expanded throughout the diaspora, it connects us in ways that I think is really powerful. All of that comes together to create what Kwanzaa is about, which is intended to be a Pan-African diasporic celebration that brings aspects of value systems and rituals that were connecting to different ethnic groups across the continent of Africa, and to sort of bring the essence of them into one place using principles and rituals. Is celebrated the week after where we celebrate Christmas here, just to not be a conflict, so people don't feel like it's a religious holiday. I grew up celebrating Christmas and Kwanzaa. My children, do Christmas and Kwanzaa. Um, I got gifts both, so it was really cool that I could open up gifts, and then a week later we got gifts again. So for me as a kid, it was always fun because it was drums and culture and art and music, and that was part of how it got into me and sort of stays in me in a way. I've been at several different Kwanzaa celebrations this year already. I mean, it has the same community kind of vibrant feel. And so there's different symbols. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on that, but I just wanted to give a quick background for how Kwanzaa was born, what the context that created it, the attempts to create a value system that is based on different understandings of different ethnic groups across the continent to create a sort of again, a Pan-African ideology that we can use to anchor our steps. So what we do during the week is for each day, each of them represents one of the principles of the Nguzo Saba, the seven principles. So we use Swahili as the language, because as a composite language by itself. But you also might hear people say Ashe, which is reference to the Yoruba people. You might hear people say Yebo, which is a reference to the Zulu people. So even in the practice of it, there's a Pan-African diasporic sense of it that I think is really, really powerful. The principles are in Umoja, the first day, unity, strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and the race. The second principle is Kujichagulia, self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Third principle is Ujima. These are all different days, starting on the 26th. It ends on the 1st. Ujima, collective work and responsibility. I can look these up. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time with it. Ujama, cooperative economics. Fifth principle is Nia, purpose. That's the day we're on today. The sixth is Kaumba, creativity. And the last that we celebrate on the 1st is Imani, which means faith. And so every day we come together, we light candles, we have the different rituals that we do. But the most important part of it is the conversation about that principle. And so we'll have conversations in our family or community about how we practice faith or cooperative economics or purpose throughout 2024, and how we can do more better in 2025, and using these principles as a guidepost. Uh, Kwanzaa became popular. In some ways, we lost some of the essence of it in the popularity of it. This is an example of what that looks like right now. This is the current president, vice president, and her husband sort of wishing everyone a happy Kwanzaa. Just play a second of this.
Hello, everyone, and happy Kwanzaa. Doug and I send our warmest wishes to all of you this holiday season.
During Kwanzaa, we celebrate the history and heritage of the African American community and the African diaspora.
Growing up, Kwanzaa was always a special time. We came together with generations of friends and family and neighbors. There were never enough chairs, so my sister and I and the other children would often sit on the floor, and together we lit the candles of the Kinara, and then the elders would talk about how Kwanzaa is a time to celebrate culture, community, and family. And they, of course, taught us about the 7 principles. My favorite principle was always the second, Kujichagulia, self-determination, the power to design your own life and determine your own future. And it is a deeply American principle, one that guides me every day as vice president.
So what's important about that, and the reason I share that is because part of the work that we're all doing around the world is going back to preserve cultural principles, find ways to expand them, to integrate them, to have other people sort of know them and be have to be accessible to people, but also maintain the integrity of what they're about. What Vice President Kamala Harris is saying is not true. The Kwanzaa principles were not deeply American value systems. The way she's describing what Kujichagulia means was not the intention of that principle. It was not this, American values have much more to do with individualism, competition, violence, capitalism. And so if you think about a rugged individualism that America promotes, it is do for self. It's by any means necessary. You win, even if that means conquering other people. It means that regardless of the impact that you have on the ecosystem or the people around you, as long as you individually are successful, then you get rewarded for that. And that is not the self-determination that Kujichagulia means. It was always a collective sense of us as a people collectively deciding what our future is, how we determine what our language and our values and our principles are. It was not a deeply American principle. It was always in contrast to what America did to us and the traumas that were inflicted on us, and how we had to find other ways of being to survive, to maintain, to find ways to achieve despite what America did. So these things are really important nuances as we talk about not Kwanzaa specifically, but also culture and principles and values around the world. So that's the conversation I want us to have. I'm going quickly just so I can make sure we have enough time to talk with everyone. But I wanted to make sure people were on the same page about why we're here, what this is about, why Kwanzaa is important, why culture is important, um, and how the current mental health conversations have a lot to do with coping and managing and sort of being more efficient cogs and wheels and systems that are not designed for us to be, our full selves. Even if you think about the definition of something like depression, you can't define depression without thinking about worthlessness. And worth is connected to your value, your sense of self, your place in the world. And if we are still being taught propaganda that Black people are worthless, did not contribute anything of value, that Africa is old, backwards, and we need to distance ourselves from that, then that will create its own psychosis, its own sort of disorientation. And so we want to talk now about how mental health, how wellness has to think about culture, values, sense of self, identity, and the work that people are doing around the world to make that a reality. So I want to quickly open up the floor to our panelists and have them start to introduce themselves and their work. And everyone here is doing really, really brilliant, impressive work. I'm going to start with, we're going to go through the United States and then go abroad. All of the United States practitioners that we have on here today are people that travel, who do workshops and, who spend extensive time outside of the United States. So I asked them to think about their cultural experiences broadly, not just as Americans. But I wanted to start with the Black folk who are here, because you might have some connections to Kwanzaa specifically as we expand and broaden out to different cultural practices beyond Kwanzaa. So we can get Dr. Kevin Washington to come in, introduce yourself, talk about maybe your connection to Kwanzaa, but also, what your work as a psychologist has how it's been anchored in culture and ritual and identity, just as you get to know everybody just a little bit. Dr. Kevin Washington, you here? There you go. You on mute. I can't hear you for some reason.
There are lots of people are not muted. It's distracting.
If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves, please. And the person we want to speak can't get off of mute. You look like you're talking, but we can't hear you. Nope, nothing. We can't hear you, Doc. Maybe you got a microphone that's off? Still nothing. Okay, try it again. Nope. Let's come back to you. Dr. Alexis Davis, uh, born here, but not here no more. Tell us a little bit about that. How you got where you are, how you came, where you came from, and maybe how Kwanzaa had any influence in your work. But just tell us more about what you're doing and what contexts have shaped your work as a healer.
Peace and love, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Obai Cartman for inviting me to be on the panel, as well as the Ancestral Institute for housing this panel. Very grateful to be here. So in regards to my connection to Kwanzaa, kind of similar to Dr. Obai Cartman, I was always in African-centered shoelace. My aunt was an instructor and teacher, and she was the aunt who was always bringing us information about culture, about who we are, and very much encouraged us to always have an inquisitive mind when it comes to who we are as a people. So I think with that upbringing, there was always a curiosity into who am I, as well as who are we as a people, which led into psychology. And how that translates now, currently I live in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and I'm expanding and learning more about other countries and places in the diaspora that I would like to live and make home spaces in. I was working on one, healing myself, because I do believe that as we heal ourselves, we heal the world. And two, sharing that healing with others to learn about what healing looks like in this space, in this landmass, and how does it look for us to collectively, as a global people, heal together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. What time is it where you at? Is it late where you at too?
It's 2:32 a.m. in the morning.
Sorry about that. And thanks for being here. So yeah, we met here in the States, and then one day she was like, I think I'm gonna move to Africa. And I didn't believe her, and now she's been there for years. So I was really inspired by your work. We're gonna get more into some of the work that you're doing specifically, but let's have everybody introduce themselves first. Dr. Kevin Washington, let's do a check with you, see if you're on first. Nope, still can't hear you. That's crazy. CIA, I'm convinced. Dr. Yai Lombe, come in and share.
Greeting, honneur, respect. My name is Dr. Ya Ilombe, and I am I'm Haitian, Haitien, and I've been here. I moved here when I was 5 years old, and I went back at 9, and so I come from a culture that is very rich, multifaceted. There's a lot of history in Haiti as the first country, independent nation. We had the first empire. We had the first Black free nation outside of Africa. So it's a health of information. However, when I came here, I didn't realize, I didn't understand the struggle that was happening here. However, it confronted me straight because the white supremacist was right there. I was in school. I was 13 in high school, and the teacher asked me, "Why am I looking at them in the face?" I was in the eyes. I was like, "What are you talking about? Where would you want me to?" So, and I was insulated by my Haitian community. So we had a Haitian community. So we move in pack. You understand? Uh, and the other thing as I was growing up, I realized is that how divided the white system created in Black, uh, uh, different Black island. Okay, they were making the Haitian feel better than the Jamaican and the Trinidadian. I had to say, okay, I was 16 when I realized that. So as I continue my journey and started meeting Black American friends. And I met a Muslim. She was Muslim, and she was telling me the history of her being bused to different parts. And I was like, what? Okay, then I started reading the history of the segregation, and it really impacted me. But still, the work was still not there because Haiti was having their own cultural crisis, okay, that I didn't know about because I came here at 5, you understand? So the history of Haiti itself has been whitewashed by French. Everything is French, French, French. However, my people continue to practice their tradition called Vodou. Okay, and today I could tell you the young people are embracing it. They're singing about it. And even for me now, when I tell my story, I don't tell no story about no Little Red Riding Hood or anything like that. I talk about my people. I talk about how they had self-determination, the Igbo people, okay? How they connect with the spirit of Mami Wata, okay? I talk about their self-determination. I talk about how they were not run by a culture with kings and queens. They were their own people. And I will end at, at this.
No, that's good.
The next person. And I was gonna say to Baba Kevin, Wata Kevin, maybe you should take off your headset. Maybe that could be the problem.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Oh, here we go. There we go. There we go.
So what we had to do, we had to jump back out and jump back in, do the hokey pokey. I guess that's what it was all about.
That's
so,
it.
So thank you so much. I spent some time in Haiti, and I tremendously was encouraged by the legacy and history of Haiti. Brother Dr. Abari, you know, when we hear about the people fighting for liberation, and it really ties into Kwanzaa, is that the fundamental question became, how are we among the people in Haiti, how are we going to fight against the oppressor, the French? And they were saying we don't have anything to fight with, and the statement was, if the Creator gave every animal, every organism something to fight against its oppressor, then why do we not have that? And so what was amazing, they said anything that you find, a spoon, a toothpick, whatever you find, that is something to fight against your enemy. And I think that is very powerful. We talk about the legacy of a population to fight against the oppressor. And the connection is that when you have conceptual systems, as Dr. Karinga was able to pull together, he was talking about the issue of fighting against the oppressor through content, information, through culture. And so I love how you contextualize this conversation on the front side.
And then also you say you've spent time in Haiti, but you also do tours and trips. Where other places you've been going? Did we lose him again? No, that's the FBI at that time.
He'll
He'll be
back.
back when he come back. We just do quick introductions for now. So let's go to Puerto Rico. Hey, Ifasayo.
Greetings to my elders, Aboru, Aboye, Aboshishe, and Leo. I hope that everyone is doing well. The name that my mother gave me is Janira Roman Lagel. My rebirth name into Isheshe practice is Ifasayo or Shafumilayo Shunike. I was born and raised in New York. My parents are from Aguada, Puerto Rico. I arrived to the United States when I was around 4 years old. My first language is Spanish. And I come from a visibly Black Puerto Rican mother. I'm a twin, so it was very interesting seeing me being more fair-skinned than my brother, and my desire, or even my identity confusion, and understanding what does it mean to be a Black Puerto Rican woman in the United States who wasn't visibly Black, that came from a Black mother, and what does Black culture mean for the Puerto Rican people? And in my journey and understanding all of that, I went back to Ibadan, Nigeria, about 1.5 years ago, and did my initiations and lived with the Yoruba people, and still very much learning because I'm a student of this practice. And I believe that Isheshe practice embodies a lot of the values that we were talking about in the beginning of this presentation. I'm a psychotherapist, and my expertise is in trauma work. I actually went to the Institute of Clinical Social Work, which is a doctoral program in Chicago, and where it's centered in psychoanalysis. And my work is deeply rooted in being able to understand the traumatic experiences of our people. In addition to that, I'm a bomba dancer, which bomba is a genre of music in which embodies the narrative of Black expression, the communication of our people through the narrative of songs, of drumming, of dance. And it's one of the most unique dances in the world because it is where the dancer actually dictates what's happening in that space. And so I'm able to communicate what I feel, and the language and the communication of resistance of our people. And during this time in Puerto Rico, there's been a big shift and a big push in understanding our Black ancestry. And in addition to the fact that it's very important for people to understand the socio-political status of Puerto Rico and the fact that we don't have the same rights as people on the mainland. So understanding the social and political context of Puerto Rican people, of Latino people, and what this means has been something that I had to heal and understand. And part of healing is going back to the root of who I am. It's been difficult for some people to understand, even on the island, as to why did you need to go all the way to Africa to understand that? Isn't our culture not enough for you? And what I try to explain to my people is that our culture is beautiful, and it is very rich, and it tells a story of our people, of our African ancestry. But we have now knowledge to be able to go back to where we were taken from and to reclaim what was taken from us. And part of reclaiming that is part of our healing process and being able to see and understand our identity. And that's how we grow. And that's what I do through bomba music. I do that through psychotherapy. I do it through Ishesha practice, and teach my daughter that our spiritual practice is community. Our spiritual practice is an everyday thing. It's not just a one-day thing, and that our spiritual practice is actually a way of life. And so that's pretty much who I am in a nutshell. So I want to give opportunities for other people to actually go. And so that's me in a nutshell. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. I got to see her dance when we had our institute in Puerto Rico over the summer. Beautiful, brilliant dancer. So thank you for being here, and love to hear more about your work as a therapist too, how those intersect. And our last panelist, last but not least, probably from the furthest from me right now, Dr. Maximus, and hailing from South Africa. Just come in and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your work and how culture impacts all of it.
Hello, colleagues. Hello, everyone, brothers and sisters. And we call to our ancestors for this unity. I'm really humbled to be amongst you as a person who is living in Africa and listening to the stories that you are sharing with us. I was born in Lesotho and raised there, and came later to South Africa. I'm now living in South Africa, although currently I'm actually in Lesotho. Over the holidays, I always come to my birthplace, maybe to get to connect with my roots also. I am at the University of Johannesburg in the Department of Educational Psychology. I'm focusing mainly on inclusive education, but also I'm leading a center for neurodiversity, in which we have formed a group of fathers of children with neurodiversity due to issues of mental health that they are facing. And we support them as much as we can, give them platform spaces where they can share their grievances, ask for help where they need such. And we have just had a very successful retreat, I call it a retreat, in which they eventually renamed themselves to say they are fathers of children with neurodiversity tribe. And this speaks, I think, to what we are trying to do here, to go back to our roots. I work generally in career transitioning of people with disabilities, but currently focusing mainly on neurodiversity. And I'm also kind of interested in research and looking at it from the philosophy of research from African perspectives. I think later on, when I'm given the opportunity, I'll touch on that, and then we take it from there. That's who I am, and I am with an elder here. If you see the name Mamutibedi Sehlabo, she is really an elder, and I'm so humbled that it's 1:45 in the morning, but she had the interest to come and be with us to hear for herself what we are talking about. I'm hoping that she's still awake and listening. And it will be a pleasure to just for her to show her face, for people to acknowledge her. Thank you very, very much, Doctor.
No, thank you so much. And thank you, Elder Mama, for being here with us. I know it's past both of y'all bedtime, so I'm really grateful for y'all being here. I want to start there. I think that because I've spent my whole life living in the United States, it's really interesting to think about how we describe the struggle of our identities in a foreign land, but I hear similar struggles back home. And I spent a lot. I mean, I went to Ghana once, and my experience being going to Ghana was really confusing for me because I grew up in an African centered place. I go to Ghana and I'm like, hey, I'm Obari. They're like, hey, I'm Michael, right? And then we trading stuff. They wanted my Jay-Z CDs and I wanted their drums. And so it was a really strange, like going back home to Washington, to the birth home, the motherland. But that wasn't my experience when I went there. And I've heard some of y'all speak to, and Dr. Alexis, you went back and maybe you could speak to what it is like to live in both places, to have a cultural anchor, but then go to Africa and there still be some of the same identity questions that we're having all around the world. Like it's so disheartening to think about how powerful the European has been on our minds wherever we are. But also encouraged to know that people are working against that. And just wanted to talk about that particular point on the continent. What does that look like there? What is the context on the continent of Africa and in Puerto Rico around the young people trying to embrace themselves? And is it the same kind of pressure to be closer to white? Is it still assimilation? Like it's still, we call it speaking the Queen's English here. Proximity to success, intelligence, beauty. All these standards are still connected to whiteness, it kind of makes sense, in an American context, but it's hard to think about what that looks like at home on the continent in places where we have what I thought would be more control and more power, but does not seem to be true. Maybe you could start, Dr. Maximus. You muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do have a struggle of identity in terms of the influence through social media and technology now that people access all kinds of things. But over the last 10 years or so, there's been a shift in that Africans in South Africa, let me particularly speak about that because that's where a lot of oppression was happening.
Right.
We now see Black people actually accepting who they are, embracing their own identity. This you see through song and dance, and you see through the traditional wear. People no longer, become fascinated about wide weddings, for example, but you will see people, getting themselves in traditional regalia. We have a war in terms of language because predominantly it's English and Afrikaans, although there is a move to embrace mother tongue so that children who are coming up, they can start learning in their own home language and then bridge into English. It's a whole melting pot in South Africa because we are talking about 11 official languages, which pretty much have a lot of impact in terms of how people view themselves, how people see themselves. A lot of them, in terms of identity, it becomes difficult because of the issues of language and other things that impact who they are as a people. I would like to stop there and maybe give others a chance, and I'll be prompted by questions.
What about Tanzania, Dr. Davis? What have you seen? I know one of the common narratives, one of the strategies of divide and conquer here in the States is this continental Africans don't like Black Americans and vice versa. But you went there and you lived there, you with them. What have you seen in terms of the cross-cultural connections around similarities or differences that's made it easy to relocate, to build community, and what are some insights that you've gained in some of the intimate conversations you've had with the Tanzanians around their cultural identity and their reclamation of self?
Thank you so much for that question. One thing I do want to follow up on what was spoken about before me in terms of language, because I think that's very important in terms of identity development. So in schools here, English is like the spoken language and the encouraged language. So much so that if you speak Swahili, some of my counterparts and friends here have talked about how if they spoke Swahili in school, they would get punished. And so I think like even that talks about like identity development and how do you actually honor your mother tongue, right? So you have a lot of younger generation people or people in my generation and younger who are working hard to like reclaim their mother tongue. For example, my son's grandmother, her first tongue is her mother tongue. Then she learned Swahili, then she's learning English. Whereas now, if you look at her children, they speak fluent English, know fluent Swahili, can understand Kisakuma, but may not speak it fluently. So you can see like the shift there. However, I do think that Tanzania is such a rich country that we're starting to see, well, I'm starting to observe a call from the land for people to take that back. So actually like embracing the history, embracing the culture of Tanzania, and you see a lot of youth doing that through art. So art is a very huge thing here, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's graffiti or visual arts. That's a very huge medium for expression and challenging some of the concepts or some of the political energy that is here in Tanzania now. So I hope I'm answering that question. And then in terms of the cross-cultural context, I think it could go both ways, right? I've had conversations where people are like, why did you move here from America? It seems like you would have more opportunity there than here. And I've literally had to tell, and this was a Black male in a workout group I was doing on the beach, and just telling him, like, do you understand that just going to America alone will, especially from Tanzania, will increase your chance of being killed, like not just dying, but being killed by 100%. And then depending on where you go, possibly 200%. And so quality of life here is something to be very grateful for, that you could say that you're in a peaceful country and that actually hold true to the integrity of that country, to the integrity of the people. So a lot of conversations around that in regards to like, why would you come here? But then also there's conversations where there's a lot of understanding of like, we get why you're here. We get, the work that needs to be done in cross-cultural, in the context of cross-cultural communities or cross-cultural growth, global African growth, is what I was getting to. And in those conversations, it's been more of, I could think of a conversation specifically that we had at Mama C's when we were talking about what does freedom truly mean. And at that time, Mama C and I were the only Africans that manifested outside of the continent. And so I brought up the fact of like, how do we house this conversation, being mindful that we all have the same oppressors, that we all have the same things that may manifest different. However, we all have the same issues. And so the topic of genital mutilation, came up, and they're like, you don't face that in the States. I say, yeah, but we're facing laws being revoked that take away our rights, so it may not look the same way, it may not manifest the same way. However, the tactic is the same, which is to take away the rights we have over our bodies, to take away the rights that we have over our minds, our souls. So I think the conversation for global Africanism has come up in those ways. And then it also has come in the context of like, but you're from America, you have more access. So I think those are the two I've observed and that I speak about, and I'll yield the floor and wait for more questions.
Fascinating. When you talked about the language recovery, I love that. That's beautiful. I'm gonna come back to you in a second, but it made me curious about other aspects of culture that are also being recovered. I'm specifically curious about like spiritual systems in parts of the continent. I remember one time I was listening to a Hugh Masekela song, and he was referencing like Oshun and Shango in the song. And it took me years to realize that that wasn't the spiritual system of his land, that that was a whole all the way across the continent of a Yoruba system. So when I hear about pieces of culture that are being revived, I often hear about like language comes up, but I'm always curious about other things like music, spirituality, other systems. And the spiritual system, that question made me think about Dr. Ya speaking to Vodun as probably the most commonly demonized system. If you want to talk about the demonization of anything African, voodoo shows up immediately. And so I wanted to talk about what that means to embrace things where in your world, in your family, you might get ostracized. You might, people talking about changing their names, and then your mama like, but that's not what I named you, right? So there's a struggle to reclaim some of these things against not just government opposition, but also just family community opposition. I was called African booty scratchers more than I can remember. People, I say my name, people mispronounce my name, and you get called weird, and you strange, and you kind of like isolated in ways that can be damaging to people who are social beings and interdependent. So, Dr. Ya, can you talk about what that's like for you to preserve even something like Vodun, pass that down to children and do it and with the awareness that that is one of the things that people like you might lose opportunities for, you might lose relationships for. What has that been like to do some of this work against some of the family, cultural, and community opposition that we experience by doing the things that should be very simple but are not always? Dr. Ya, can you speak to that?
Oh, wow. Obari. Oh,
Yes,
my 88-year-old aunt is here with me, and she was
oh, the
asking.
elders in the room. That's how we know we're doing a good thing. I love
Well, as I was about to cry as Alexis was talking about, the language, how Swahili is not even the language over there. And the first thing that came to mind, if you want to see how the oppressor has been working, you could look at Haiti because they've used all the tactics on Haiti, and still the people resist. We seem like we're out of control, but it's because they have to fight, okay, on a spiritual level, even though we have been westernized. Haiti is so westernized. English is, everybody want to speak English because it's called the commercial language. So I don't remember some of your question, but I can only tell you that right now, I work with a group of rural farmers. They live on top of the mountain. When you go up there, it's as if it is still 1804. They still don't have running water.
Oh, is that good? Okay.
They don't have housing. They don't have sanitation. However, they continue their practice of Vodun. Okay? They still or agriculture, they're farmers, so they farm. However, they still want to integrate with that life by sending their kids there. So there's a movement now to really educate them that this school system that are very westernized is not helping you. You live in an ecosystem that has everything you need. So one of the focus is to really allow them to use their own critical thinking in their own environment. And they're very aware of the damages that is happening in their environment. They had coconut trees that they say at night they see planes come and spray them, and now the tree is dying. Okay, but ask me the question again, because I was
I want to know
distracted.
about your journey coming into yourself. You are
Oh, my
very,
journey.
um,
That
and,
was.
and specifically thinking about growing up with such a demonized system. We talked
Oh,
about like voodoo being something that is just always immediately associated with devil worship, right?
okay.
But
Let me
this is
tell
something
you
you're
the
very
story.
proud of.
Let me tell you the story quickly.
Yeah.
When I came here when I was 5, at 9, my parents decided to get divorced, and they sent my brother and I back to Haiti to live with my uncle who lived next to a Vodou temple. 9 years old, okay? And he was very Catholic. But however, I was there, I would see the beautiful display of the groups of women who would come to the temple to do their dance in red, in blue, and green. And I never paid it attention. So here we are, fast forward. I come back to America. I'm 13. I'm dealing with all the segregation here. And as I'm getting, I'm in my 20s, 30s, and I meet my Iya, who practiced Lukumi, and she also does the Kwanzaa, annual Kwanzaa, yearly. So it was through her that I began to go to her classes with Lukumi, learning about the different Orishas, Legba, Ogun, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is the same as in Haiti. And because of her teaching, it awakened what was dormant in me. And I then went to seminary. I then found a program that taught theology and psychology, because I did not want to learn theology because my parents are Catholic, but I never connected to Catholicism. So I went to seminary at a Hebrew school, Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute. I always say to myself, how did you get as a Haitian into a Jewish, but it's part of life lesson. But that was my walk into awakening, I have to say, what was dormant in me. And today, I have to say that because of that, I'm able to connect with elders in my community who have been teaching me about Vodou, about the practices, about the different nation, and how we continue to sing the song. Now I'm into singing the song because some of the song has powerful meaning that I didn't understand when I was growing up. Okay. So for example, there's a song that says, "Won't God, hold on, let me tell you. Ibolele, ibolele ho, ibolele ho, mayama kamun pajwe ho." Then this one that says, "Mayama ibolele, ibolele, mayama ibolele, upile piempa timpado." So the song said, it's talking about the Igbo people. They're very fierce, strong people. And it said, you step on me and you don't say you're sorry. But the song was being sung back, think the 1500, 1600. What it was saying was that here I am, look at the abuse, the suffering, the violence you have caused me. Even if you were to say sorry, what would your sorry do for me? So this song that they would be singing in secrecy, passing messages to others. Okay, so I became, I don't call myself, I haven't been initiated. I'm an adherent, I'm a practitioner. I call myself a Voodoo V, okay? And what I do now with my learning from seminary is I tell stories, and my stories always include the embodiment and historical stories about my people, because Haitian, as much as we are proud and fierce, we don't know our history. We don't know the history of the ancestors, and we practice some of the tradition, but here in America, we don't know it as much, and in Haiti it's the same. So my job is to be a cultural keeper and to pass on these stories and to work with other elders who have the stories so we can continue our tradition and know who we are, self-determination.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Kevin Washington, you still back? Are you back yet?
I am back.
Fantastic. I'm gonna come to you in 1 second. I'm gonna go through Ifasayo and ask this question to both of y'all to start with. Everybody else can speak to it too, because we got a bunch of doctors on the call, which means that y'all did like me, which is go to this white man school, get the credentials. I got a bunch of old white men in my head, the Freud, Skinners, and Wilhelm Wundts and Becks and all of that. Didn't have to come back to the south and west side of Chicago and do work that was misaligned. And so part of what we're talking about are doing things that were not a part of our training, not a part of our certifications, not a part of the evidence-based work that we sometimes have to do to keep the funding. So I'm curious to know how y'all are mixing, merging, integrating this work as professionals. We've been talking a lot about the personal journeys, but I'm curious about the professional journeys. We'll start with Ifasayo and then go to Dr. Washington. Um, Ifasayo does, and what I know is to be healing medicinal work through Ifa, but then you also were trained as a psychodynamic therapist. Are those two things that are like two parts of yourself? Are you finding ways to integrate them? Are you like secretly doing EFI work as a therapist for people that might be afraid of the EFI work? Like, what does it look like to resist our trainings and the pressure still to pay mortgages and feed kids and get jobs while knowing that some of the things we have to say and do are anti who we are at our core? Ifa Sayo and then Dr. Washington. Can y'all speak to that for us?
Yes. I have a lot of respect for the Institute of Clinical Social Work and everything that I learned in the Institute in Chicago. But I would have to say that during my time there, I really had to defend my position as a Puerto Rican woman who also identifies as a Black woman in the spaces of being to analyze different articles, theories, and how that does not represent the reality of our people. So many times I found myself very conflicted, even in my own learning process about, I understand the theories and the clinical applications. However, how does this really correlate, or how does this play out in psychotherapy with the things that we see with our people? For instance, Puerto Rican people and most people from Latin American countries, we are spiritual people. We believe in speaking to spirit. We believe in ancestors. We have different rituals and ceremonies embedded within our culture, even if we also integrate Catholicism or some other type of Christianity. But part of our work, right? And I used one of my first jobs was at Woodhull Hospital, was understanding that not everybody or not every Latino that comes in talking about, I see spirit, I hear spirit, is somebody who's psychotic. This is part of who we are as people culturally, and getting people to understand that we are misdiagnosing our people. We are discriminating against our people because the way that we see the world from a spiritual perspective doesn't mean that that's mental health. That doesn't mean there's a mental health illness per se. Yeah. So part of my work in psychotherapy, and I also work with the veteran population, so I do a lot of different types of work with different populations, is having people feel comfortable with saying, I dreamt with my grandmother. What does that mean, right? And taking away the fear base of expressing that in psychotherapy. And when people see my ide or my ilekas, they're like, oh, I can speak to her about this without being sent to the inpatient unit or somebody saying that I'm psychotic. And so part of me representing who I am is giving people a safe place to be able to talk about these things without being discriminated against, but also the underpinnings of racial discrimination of our people. In addition to that, when I talk about IFA work, and I'm very much still a student, I have so much where to go, and I know this is going to take me probably a lifetime. I will die learning the philosophy of IFA and everything that we have to learn through our journey. Is that part of the struggle, I would say, and I'm going to speak for myself, but I know that a lot of Puerto Rican people have this experience, is that we don't have a direct tie to where we are actually from.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of mixtures in our culture, right? It's not just the Spanish that colonized Puerto Rico. There's a lot of different European influences, and then we have the Taino influence of the indigenous native people, and then we have the African influence. And it could be right now, the way that I see our people going is that we want to find that. We need to find the root of who we are in order to understand who we are in the context of being Puerto Rican, yet also being a colony of the United States, because that's the reality of the Puerto Rican experience, right? And so me coming back to Puerto Rico when I was in Nigeria and bringing this root, this is what I learned, this is what I am, this is who I am, gives people an opportunity to be like, I can be that. I can hold on to that. That is tangible for me. And I can learn part of my African ancestry if that's what you choose. Because there's an array of different African spiritualities.
Right.
So what I want people to feel comfortable with is that what we've been taught by the colonizer doesn't have to be the only way. And if we open up our minds past what we were taught, we will be enlightened with more healing growth. In correlation to bomba music, and as I was talking about, it's bomba music is a genre that's heavily African influenced, and where the music was the communication of our people of resistance, the communication of slaves, and a lot of people didn't know that Puerto Rico actually had this. Some people failed to realize that there's a large Black community in Puerto Rico, and that part of my psychotherapy in getting people to connect with the dance is that because of the way bomba is, the way that we express ourselves, because we're the ones dictating what the drummer is doing, is that how can I express my emotions and my resistance and my trauma through the art of dance? How can I speak to that? Because that was the core definition of our music to begin with. So there's a lot of identities of Ifasayo. And part of my healing process is like understanding how I put these all together and then bring them forward into my psychotherapy and my work. I hope I was able to answer that question.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Imwata.
Yeah, thank you so
and
much.
actually, so I
Yes,
don't
good.
want to miss this connection too, Doc. We got a South African professor on the call too, and you just released a book
Ubuntu.
called Ubuntu, right?
Yes.
So I want to make sure
Samubonga.
y'all speaking on that too. But just respond to the question first.
Indeed. I mean, that's it, right? The idea of releasing. Thank you so much, Ifesayo and Dr. Yao and Alexis. I mean, it's a powerful discourse, right, happening. And so we talk about doing the work, the healing work. It is understanding, as we see the work of Dr. Karinga, capturing what does it mean to be African globally? What does it mean to be Pan-African? And what are some of the core values that we hold on to? That's the thing that has been very critical in the context of healing. So we talk about the issue of what is Nia? What is my Nia? Is the issue of how do we talk about Kuja Chagalia? We talk about doing this work, Ifesayo, doing this work of a restoration of African consciousness within the people in psychology. We're actually engaging in social justice or liberation work, right? Because when we talk about how do you affirm yourself, how do you identify with ritual, how do you understand spiritness and spirit being, right? And so all of this is antithetical to the European or the oppressor or the colonizer's ideology. And that's the idea that as you said earlier, Dr. Cartman, you said that and I'm saying this way, that every day the oppressor wakes up at war, attacking, addressing. That's how you address. That's how you open up. And the issue is that the people who are being attacked don't know that they're being attacked, they're being aggressed against, and so they don't know that they're at war. And it's like, well, I'm not at war. Yes, you are. If somebody is coming for you, if you decided not to be at war, you still at war. It doesn't matter how you look at how you shake it up. So for me, then the at war part becomes the restoration of African consciousness in the context of spiritness and being, right? And so we know then that the word psychology, psyche, comes from the saku word. Saku means essence of being. So in reality, then it is about how do you bring about some awareness of what it means to be and to be human. So to affront people, a person of African descent, is not to just simply hit them on their skin, but when you say something against their essence, right? You don't know me like that. See, the like that part means you know me, you know my name, but you don't know my essence, right? And so it's critical to understand that that the assault, the attack is there, and so that's how we talk about restoring. We restore, and also through language. What are some common practices, right? Ritual, umzabezi among the Zulu, right? What are some rituals that are practiced? And one concept I came across when I was in South Africa which is abapanda basifulutele, which is the withdrawal of ancestral protection because of failure to perform proper rituals. So for me, then psychology, psychotherapy is about ritual work. How do we honor one another through altars, through shrines, through calling people by names? That's critical to the conversation. And so doing the work with our people in certain spaces, such as doing the work right now in the VA, Dr. Cartman, in closing, someone comes in and says, you know, damn, I'm so glad you're here. I can now talk about this bullshit I've been dealing with, right? And so it becomes this person who relieves, right, them of having to have the barrier, wear the mask, and go into their essence. And so the work then gets into not just masking the discourse, but actually freeing people up to say that, yes, these are things that you actually do. Now, we don't always put it in the language of our people, but we give them the practices. And they say, you know, as a matter of fact, I do that. I do have a place in my house where I have a table, some pictures and so forth and so on. How do you connect? How do you make sure that you know who you are? How do you know what has been stolen from you, right? And so how do we talk about restoring that thing? And so we talk about the Makola, for example, just the other day, and this guy said, I like that idea, Makola, knots to get tied into your biogenetic rope through trauma, through experiences. And then one of our goals is to, among the Bakongo, is to go in and untie the knots. And the guy said, yes, that's good. I need to untie some of these knots so that the generation that comes after me doesn't have to contend with this. So we give the language, but also give the practice because they understand the process of colonization. And we all understand that. And so Ubuntu psychotherapy talks about the issue of what it means to be human. And for African people to be human is to be spirit beings elevated in consciousness at all time, not simply being physical. That's why I love the Zulu proverb, Umuntu Ugabantu, right? A person is a person because they were other people that only have meaning in the context of my otherness and vice versa. And that's African way. That is the African way. That is European, as you said earlier, is individualistic. So how do you then reclaim your identity, your purpose, your power is part of the therapeutic work as well. And it's not about me, but it's about how we function and how my beingness is connected to those that have gone before me, those that are around me, those that are yet to come. That is also part of the healing work.
Love it, love it. And I'll also add to your answer without you saying it yourself is that one of the things I've experienced with you is an expression of that through drums, right? So we've done drum therapy sessions where we reintroduce people to that particular practice as a healing modality, which I know we didn't get in school, but you know we met a decade or so ago before you were the national president of the Association of Black Psychologists, and when I walked in the room, I said, "Oh, there's a drummer here." Right, we connected on that before we even spoke, and then I know in your healing work, you travel the world and also give that to people as a specific technology. So I just wanted to speak to that too. Dr. Maximus, can you say more about how Ubuntu shows up in your work as a professor right in South Africa?
Yeah, can I be allowed to show my screen a little bit?
Yeah, please. No, you got it.
Yeah. Colleagues, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah,
I think I'll just go through my presentation, really quickly, just to share, colleagues, with you some of the thoughts which have been reflected already, even in what we are saying. As I said, I hail from Lesotho. That's where I was born. But what I would like to share about is what we are talking about in terms of the meaning of life, the discernment that we want to understand ourselves. Dr. Washington, you were talking about Ubuntu, and this is so much central to what we are talking about and who we are. Amongst these people that you see here, there's no one who feels like, outside. If one finds themselves outside the cycle, then the meaning of their identity diminishes in a way. And we come from that communal setting that I can't see myself always as an individual, but literally my meaningfulness comes from who I am as a person. I'll skip some of these due to the constraints of time, but I would like to talk about what we refer to in terms of one's self-identity from the Sesotho perspective. We look at it from the perspective of saying that we are of two minds or two parts. And those are actually explained through what we believe in Lesotho as the ontology of our existence, which comes from what we call mele pelo le moya, mele meaning the body, pelo meaning the heart, and moya meaning the spirit. This is our identity. If you ask a Mosotho about who they are, even in our greeting when we greet, we say, we don't say good morning to one another. We just say to a person, how are you? Where are you in terms of your identity, your spiritual nature, and your body? Do you have any aches? That for us becomes something that is very important. It becomes the driving force between what we are doing in terms of understanding our well-being. I will skip this, I've spoken about it, but I'll run into the balance that we need to have between the mind and the body right here in gold. That balance in terms of the understanding of who I am becomes very important. And this is encapsulated into Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an African philosophy. But as I said, I am talking here as a Mosotho from Lesotho, and we use clan names and totems to explain to ourselves and to others who we are. And these are very much powerful in terms of even motivating one to become a person who they strive to be. Just a few examples. Major Sesotho at clans, we have the Bataung who align themselves with the lion, and this is their identity. And we have the Batkaping who align themselves with the fish, and we have the Batlou who align themselves with the mighty elephant. I belong to the crocodile clan. Just this past 2 days, I went into the heart of Lesotho, the high mountains at the Semongo, where the family, the whole clan got together to try and find out who are we, where do we come from? So this answers your question to say, what is happening in terms of identity? And we look at that congruence of the body, the heart, and the spirit, and say to ourselves, once we have that equilibrium, then we are hopeful that there is positive mental health, and this is what we are talking about. So in my work at the university, I also teach about, we know that the Greeks gave us pedagogies and all of those, but we have a word here that was coined by a Nigerian, Bangura. He talks about Ubuntu Goji. And why can't we have our students now beginning to use the Ubuntu paradigm, where we have researched and found that we can talk about African research canons, which juxtapose what we find in terms of the ontology, epistemology, methodology, axiology. We come from the West. And what I have done is to come up with this diagram that allows me, under research, to look at what can be juxtaposed with paradigm in terms of ontology, epistemology and axiology. And I'm looking at it from the Boto or Ubuntu paradigm, using the canons and using our own principles from Africa, where ukweli means people's experiences, and it is aligned with ontology, but kujuita is a structure of knowledge which can be juxtaposed with epistemology and as well as axiology, where we are saying if there's no harmony, if there's no justice. I had another speaker talk about social justice, and these are the issues which really ring mighty amongst us. So in Africa, there are these philosophies that exist, and there are these theories and bodies of knowledge, but we are strongly advocating for our upcoming scholars and whoever is in this work. We are trying to say, even to our the training of our educational psychologists, psychiatrists, whoever it is, that we begin to look at the generation of knowledge from our own African perspectives. And ladies and gentlemen, we have had this man was the man who taught King Musheshe to be one of the strongest leaders of his day. This is why Lesotho is an enclave within South Africa, because through the wisdom of this man, because he wanted to have that special identity of his nation, he kept fighting to the extent that
I
even
took his
today,
family to work.
Mute yourself,
have,
please. If you're coming
yes.
in, mute yourself. I'm trying to find him.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. This is the final slide, I think. And we have even today, in terms of issues of mental health, our own indigenous plants that have been scientifically proven, tested to be healing some of the ailments that we have. For example, Leshoma will heal mental health diseases. We have Potsesha, which will heal hysteria, headache, depression, and all of that, Mahaladito, and all of the rest. And I am thankful that we have had this opportunity to be with you today. And I'm learning so much, and I hope and wish that at some point we will be able to do more in terms of talking, and also joining hands, because the problem that we have is that after we speak, we no longer connect and find out what are you doing in your own space, so that I can say, Dr. Washington, I actually need, when you come to South Africa, to connect with you so that you come and see what it is that we are doing. Thank you so much, Doctor.
No, thank you so much.
Dr.
I'll
Cartman,
say
thank
a
you,
couple
sir.
quick things on. No, you got it. Go.
I want to thank you for this connection, because something just happened in this conversation, and so I'm grateful. So I wanted to remind people that Ubuntu UBU means being, NTU means unifying life force. So it talks about a unifying life force that gives us essence and or being. So it's all those things run through everything that we do. And what I find to be so powerful in the healing work, we mentioned about language earlier, is that we find, like, for example, in greetings, sabubona, right? Yebu sabubona. And people think that it's actually saying, I see you, but the word comes from bukona or kona, and kona means presence. And so the question is, do you have a presence? Right. So all over the continent, the greeting is never, as the doctor said, it's never about the person. How are you doing, so to speak? It's how is your essence, your being. If you say share lafiani, right? How are your relationships in your space? If I greet somebody in the Gambia, or Somali, or Nagadev, the question they always ask is about, and how is the family, even in East Africa. So what we know is that for African people, what it means to be is to be connected to something greater than yourself. And if I go back to where I come from in Louisiana, Hiya Mama Nim, right? Hiya Mama Nim was the question. Who are the Nim you're talking about, right? The Nim is, how is your mother and all of those that are connected and tied to her? right? And so it's always about the collective identity. And so when we talk about then being, it's that. And so, well, Rico's out there on that stuff again. Would tell your mama I'm coming by with some greens. And Baba mentioned about this idea of medicinal properties and healing. What do the greens have to do with the boy being out there on that stuff? The idea is that as the greens are being prepared, there's going to be an incantation, as Dr. Yao mentioned earlier about the temple. There's an incantation going into those greens, right? There's going to be something being released in the greens. So when they are delivered to the house, it's not just a pot of greens. It's a medicinal, spiritual element to be consumed. And then they say, well, come on in. Right, put the greens on the stove. They may eat some, or may not. Then they will always get into a circle and do it. Have a prayer, because we're going to pray for Rico, because if Rico's out there on that stuff, Mama is disrupted. Right, and so for us, we see it whether it is Zulu Sabobono, we see it Lafani, we see it at Toussaint among the God. It's the same question: how are your connections? Right. And so that's the power of the healing work. And so we will be connecting further, but I want to say that's a part of the healing work as well. So we ask people, what are your rituals that do have the connection, that acknowledge that you are only here because someone else? And so it's bigger than I see you. The idea of your presence is, are you connected to that which is going before you, that which is around you, and that which is yet to come?
Beautiful. Wow. Thank y'all so much, man. I just wanted to say what's so powerful about the providing the social, spiritual theories of practice is that when you think mental health and wellness, we think often about the frontline practitioners, the therapists, but without the researchers and the scholars and the philosophers, by default, all of the therapy is European philosophy centered if we don't distinguish it as something else. And so what y'all have done in sort of the PowerPoint you just shared in the book you wrote, Dr. Washington, is giving us a theory of practice, a conceptual framework that also connects to what Kwanzaa is about, that gives us some blueprints to walk in. And so it's just so important that we have that as a base, as a way of thinking about it, and not just, people don't like the panels no more. Cause like we got to do work. We just got to start doing stuff. But if you're just doing by default without thinking about the theory and the framework, then we just repeating the cycles of things that we were trained to do, which often is getting us further and further away from ourselves. So I just want to thank y'all so much for providing some grounding around conceptualization. I told my panelists I was gonna keep them for 90 minutes. We are at that. I got 1,000 more questions, so we're gonna have to come back. I do want to say that the point of the Ancestral Institute is to be a convening body. So that question of how do we stay connected is answered by your presence here. We got y'all emails. If y'all following us on Instagram, this is the thing that we want to continue to do, to come back to, whether it's virtually or in person. Who was in Puerto Rico a couple months ago? We're gonna be maybe South Africa in October, maybe Bahia. We're looking for a site to host the next in-person gathering, because we need to do this. We need to talk. We need to meet. We need to feel each other, sing our songs, play our drums. And so the Ancestral Institute is designed for that, to be a convening body for all of these things. Before we wrap, I wanted to open the floor for at least 10 minutes if we can, if people have any questions. Antoine Craigwell, the founder of the Ancestral Institute, is here, so he can get first dibs if you have questions for the panelists. But if there's any others that are here that have had a burning statement or resource or insight to share, we could probably get about 10, 15 more minutes again. It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning for some of my panelists. So I want to make sure we get them bed.
Thank you very much,
I
Dr.
see
Cartman.
Antoine.
So we got Antoine.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Cartman. Thank you very much, Dr. Cartman, for trying to, for pulling this all together. I'm Dr. Davis, all the way in Tanzania. Thank you for staying up late. Dr. Maximus, Don, thank you for staying up so late. And I will certainly want to talk to both of you separately. So, Dr. Davis, I need to talk to you as well and touch base with you. I've already established a connection with Ifeitayo in Puerto Rico. Kevin, I want to talk to you as well and follow up with you guys. So I'm grateful that Dr. Cartman has been able to pull this whole convening together to continue the work that we started and we did in November in Puerto Rico. And as he said, we're looking to do this again later on next year, either South Africa, Bahia, Belize, Costa Rica, somewhere in the U.S. Southwest or in the Appalachians. Who knows where we can find the space? Alexis, you were talking just now about language and Swahili. And I remember in 2021, we did an online forum looking at community members who were resilient in their respective communities globally in the global South. And we thought about doing part of the program in Swahili for the people in East Africa. And we were told by some of the people from Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, and South Africa that in fact, there are different places where Swahili is not accepted, is not seen as it's part of the language of oppression, of revolution, of not so much revolution, but of oppression and violence. And so many communities have preferred not to speak Swahili because it reminds them of that pain. While in other countries, it has become part of the language. So like in I think in Botswana and parts of Mozambique, they're beginning to embrace Swahili, and in Botswana, for example, Setswana is beginning to be emerging as a predominant language. What have you heard with respect to that, the division between what is supposed to be an indigenous language, but really isn't, and the how that language as a form of identity contributes or has roots in violence and oppression for East Africans?
Thank you for this question. I'm jotting down notes to start asking and doing some additional research because I haven't heard that here from counterparts that I've spoken with. In fact, I hear a lot of people wanting to just speak Swahili or, like I said, speak their mother tongues, because you have more instances where English is associated with level of success or status. So you have areas such as Masaki or Mbezi, where you'll have people who are indigenous to this landmass but will not speak Swahili. So here I come, Habari, Mambo, Ukopoa, and they're looking at me like, you could speak English, sis. So I think that in that regard, that's what I've experienced. And I will also be looking into the connection between Swahili and history of violence.
Thanks. Quickly, if you permit me, Dr. Cartman. Don, you're in Lesotho, and according to the World Health Organization, Lesotho has the highest suicide rate in the world right now.
Yes.
I'm from Guyana. We have the second highest suicide rate in the world per capita. How do you, and I know that there's a sacred mountain in the center of Lesotho that you talked about. Many people go up that mountain and try to return to communing with the ancestors. But then how do you then reconcile the fact that Lesotho has the highest suicide rate in the world per capita with what you're talking about in terms of returning to the ancestral roots and being able to connect that as a way to healing mental health and preventing suicide? Or is suicide cultural, as we know with the Akan people in Ghana? So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Thank you so much. It's an unfortunate situation, which I've begun to get into conversations to say we have not learned from Chief Mohlomi and how he approached this. A little bit of background to that is that a lot of the men in Lesotho would go and work in the mines in South Africa. But those mines closed, and therefore the men en masse had to return to Lesotho, and they are staying with families jobless. Lesotho, as I said, is an enclave that does not have natural resources that can maintain its economy. So what we are experiencing now are the after effects of all those movements that have been happening over years, of families that are frustrated, plus the fact that we started talking about identity. Our young Basotho had bought wholesale foreign identities, which now they have, they find themselves under pressure to emulate, to buy this and that because I want to be like so and so in the USA or whoever, whatever the part of the world it can be. But the World Health Organization is really trying to do something now. And we have scholars who have, some of them have studied in the USA. But what I'm hearing is that they are talking now the language of going back to the roots, the indigenous ways of dealing with these issues, so that we can harness in a way the issue of the high rate of suicide in the country. It is among young people and women. And remember, the women would stay, will remain raising the families when the men are in the mines working. But now, with a retrenched husband at home and no provision of what you can do to keep the family afloat, becomes very frustrating for most women. And this is where we are currently.
I have a question for Maximus, and I have a friend that's Lesotho, and when I look at the map and I see South Africa and I see Lesotho in the middle, and I know that's as a result of the scramble back when the colonizer came. So, and you talk about going back to the root. So isn't Lesotho connected with South African heritage? No?
Lesotho is an independent country.
When did it become?
It's got its own sovereignty. It's got a king and a constitution, who is a constitutional monarch, and we have a parliament, and that runs the government. But that enclave that you see, a big chunk of it was taken by South Africa. What is currently known as the Orange Free State was formerly Lesotho. But we know that what happened, in those days, the whites would have formed their cahoots between themselves and they take whatever they can from you. But our king resisted to say, even if I remain with this little piece, but I would still like to remain independent. It happened twice. There were wars that were fought, but Basotho stood their ground and said, we don't want to be annexed into South Africa. Even today, the same narrative is still holding, although in terms of resources, as I have shown, very little sustains the country, but that patriotism still remains, and the people want to remain independent from South Africa.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you all of y'all for such wisdom and insight. We're going to wrap here. We're going to give the panelists one last opportunity to share final statement as your contact information. If people have more questions or want to connect with you and do work, if y'all share what the best way to reach you are, you could do it in the chat or you can say it out loud. And then we're going to wrap this. I want to respect the time I asked for my panelists and let them go to sleep. And if there are burning questions, that just means we got to keep coming. We got to keep coming back, and we got to keep creating the time to invest in the Ancestral Institute and create spaces to have this conversation. None of this can be solved in an hour and a half. So we just wanted to give y'all a little taste of what we have coming. But we have a final word and contact information for the panelists, and we will call this a day.
Mwata357@gmail.com. Also, Speak Black to Me, a YouTube channel. We're working on some things there. So that's,
you got a link to your new book too? How we buy your book?
That link is going to be on Nyansapo Empowerment, but yeah, I get that one to you. Okay. Nyansapoempowerment.com.
Okay. Yeah, whatever you can put in the chat.
I will. I'll do that right now.
Thank you so much, Baba, for being here. Definitely. Appreciate you always. Dr. Yao, any final statements, any closing remarks, ways to contact you, resources that you wanted to share, campaigns you're working on, you need support with?
Oh, okay. Well, What would I want to say? I want to say that I work with farmers in Haiti, rural farmers, and I am also a storyteller. I do counseling, but I really focus on Haitian, particularly Haitian family. So that's my niche. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to put my contact in the in the chat here. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Ifasayo, any closing remarks or ways to contact you or things you're working on you need support from around the world?
Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone has a blessed night. I left my email in the chat, janira.roman@gmail.com. You can also find me on IG as Ifasayo. So part of the work that we're doing now is we're doing a lot of bomba workshops with the integration of mental health. So utilizing drumming as part of the meditation and grounding, a way of getting people to connect with their mind, body, and spirit. So a holistic approach. So we're working on that now here on the island with very recognized elders in the movement of bomba here in Puerto Rico. So I would be more than willing to bring the bomba group, Bomba Abule, which means community of indigenous people. And so it would be a pleasure for us to be able to continue to spread our music and being able to continue to do mental health through our spirituality and through the arts. So I thank you for having me, and I hope that we can continue to build this community, and that we will reunite again. And I welcome everyone to Puerto Rico. If anyone is coming to the island, let me know. I will receive you with much love, unity, and community.
I was there last week. I wish I had known this last week, but we shall be back.
Yes, we will.
I'm gonna come back to. I love that place. Dr. Alexis, any closing remarks, resources, things you need from us?
Peace. I left my email in the chat, davis.alexis12. No, my work is just working on curating retreats and spaces where collective healing is welcome. So just any resources or guidance tips, definitely open to that, and just continue learning and growing. Thank you all for this space and for everybody being here.
Thank you. And Dr. Maximus, any final thoughts? Resources, you got any books you have links to or things that we can do to help support your work also?
Okay. Thank you so much, my brother. I would like to say I saw somebody requesting if the presentation could be shared. Please feel free to do so. And my email is on there. And as I said, I am beginning to link the indigenous knowledge system of Boto and Ubuntu with philosophy and psychology to find that space where we can create a voice for our indigenous knowledge systems against, allow me to say, Euro-Western knowledge systems. That is why I was making that kind of comparison. And I'm trying to inculcate that into my students to say, let's think African, even when we do research. When we go to the village, I can't go and say to the chief in my village, I have an ethical clearance here. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. But in our own indigenous ways, we can come up with a lot of rich knowledge that can actually feed back into the mainstream knowledge systems to say, hey, here we are, we have alternative knowledge systems that have been, put under the bushel, but we want them to be known now. I think if people would be interested in the work that we are doing, if you type all my names, Maximus Monahense Photo, Google Scholar Citation, some of the works that I'm talking about appear there, and people will be having access to all of those. Thank you so much, my brother.
Fantastic.
Dr. Maximus, look at the title of this book, please.
Pardon me?
The title, Ubuntu Psychotherapy.
The title of my book. Oh,
no, this,
okay.
This one here. This
okay.
One.
So, show that again, please. I didn't see it.
Ubuntu Psychotherapy. Okay. But anyway, it's based on Ubuntu psychology.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Anyway,
I'll check
so
it.
there's an alignment. Dr. Cartman, you
right,
did
right.
something special here, so I appreciate you so much. Much love to you.
No, I appreciate you all. Thank y'all so very much. We're gonna wrap here. It's been a beautiful time. Keep in touch with the Ancestral Institute and have a wonderful rest of your evening or morning, wherever you're at. Thank y'all so much for coming.
Yeah, it's 10 to 3 for me, so I'll
It's time for
try
you
and
to go
catch
to
some
bed.
sleep. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Odabo.
Thank you.
Double.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Obari. Thank you for